Good afternoon, Pokésports, and welcome to another tier list video. In today's video, we're going to go ahead and look at the Steel type, which is arguably, I think it's kind of hard to argue, honestly, but it's one of the best, if not the best, typings in the game. After they introduced Fairy, Steel type got such a gigantic buff because now you have an offensive move against Fairy types, and it's one of the few weaknesses that Fairy have. I mean, the only other weaknesses that Fairy have are Poison, and Poison type isn't quite as popular. The thing that Steel types give you is how many defenses they have. On top of being a very defensive typing, you're also a very good offensive typing now. So it's kind of got the best of both worlds. They all are tanky for the most part. They all hit like a truck for the most part. Let's go ahead and see which is the best and which is the worst. So how I like to do in every single one of these videos, let's start with the top. Which Pokemon are we going to give S in Steel type tier? S for Steel type. I think this goes without saying that Zacian deserves this spot. Zacian definitely deserves this spot. And I think even in the Fairy type list, it deserves that spot as well. This Pokemon is everywhere. And it makes sense. It goes on the field and gets a +1. It also goes on the field and has very high defenses with very great typing, that being Steel and Fairy. And, you know, super high speed. Outspeeds the majority of the metagame, let alone the majority of all Pokemon. It's in the top 10 speeds in the game. So that's fun. Along with that, also has a move that makes it do 2 times damage to Dynamax Pokemon. So I think they made that Pokemon very good for a very good reason. Now, let's go ahead and look at what's at the bottom of the list. The worst of the worst. The pitiful Steel type, to say the least. That's Galarian Stunfisk. Galarian Stunfisk really didn't do what they wanted it to do, huh? It's actually a little bit disappointing. There isn't much that it can do, to be honest. Its HP is not there. Its defenses aren't there. Its speed isn't there. It's kind of just a wasted Pokemon. No offense to any Galarian Stunfisk lovers out there, but I think that's fair to say. Now let's continue on with the rest of this list because there are a couple Pokemon that I think I'm gonna have trouble ranking on here. Couple of Pokemon that once upon a time were maybe good that maybe aren't that great right now, and a couple of Pokemon that compared to others in the Steel type list are good, but maybe on a list of all the Pokemon in the current decks are not good. Who knows? But something that does go without saying, and that I think is also fair for people to consider, is that Dialga probably deserves to be S tier. A lot of these Pseudo-legends and a lot of these restricted mobs are going to be S tier because they're all seeing a lot of play in the current VGC 2022 meta. I do see a lot of Dialgas. Dialga is definitely not... It's probably not high S tier. We'll go into like some more in-between Zacian and in-between Dialgas later on in the video. It's probably not high S tier, but it's definitely in the S tier. I feel it's still a very good Pokemon and still deserves, you know, a spot up there. This is actually going to be so difficult for me because so much of the Pokemon that I'm looking at are very good. It's going to be very hard for me to rank them. But let's go ahead, move on. Scizor is going to be a little rough because Scizor is a great Pokemon. It's not played right now because it's kind of shut down by Psychic Terrain and by Queenly Majesty. And, you know, currently in the meta, you have Kyogre and Zacian. Scizor doesn't really help with either one of those. I think Scizor is a solid B tier, if not A tier. I feel like A might be a better suit for it. I guess we'll see how the rest of the list does form itself to see if I do want to change that. But for now, I'm going to stick it in B. Mawile, that's going to be rough. Because Mawile, if it had a Mega, it'd be good. If it had a Mega, it'd be really good. I'm going to stick it in D tier just because you can still intimidate. And just because it does have Sheer Force Life Orb abilities. It might be F tier later on in the video, but for now, I'm going to stick it in D tier. Metagross. Metagross, I'm going to say A. I feel like Metagross is better than Scizor, and I think Metagross for a while in, you know, Series 9 and Series 10, you did see some Metagross usage because you were able to take advantage of the weakness policy and sweep with that. You know, Psychic and Steel is a very good typing, very good type combination. Speaking of Psychic and Steel, I think Solgaleo not above Zacian, but definitely better than Dialga in my opinion. Especially recently, I just finished watching the Victory Road VGC Season 12 tournament. It's like a 500 player tournament. It was so packed, and the finals had a Solgaleo sitting next to a Palkia, constantly going for the max steel spikes. Not a Palkia, next to Kyogre, constantly going for max steel spikes to raise the Kyogre's defense while the Kyogre was sitting there and setting up with Calm Minds. So you just ended up having the tankiest Kyogre in all the land because of the setup that Solgaleo was able to do. Moving on with the list. Zamazenta, I'll say, is B tier. Zamazenta can be good, but it wastes a whole restricted spot, right? It's a little underwhelming for me, and it's just exactly what Zacian is, but worse. I mean, I guess it does get a fighting type in there, but that doesn't always mean the end-all be-all, right? That's not always a good reason to run along and have a Zamazenta instead of a Zacian. Don't get me wrong, it's definitely not a bad Pokemon. And I feel like the discrepancy is that people think it's a bad Pokemon when they see it. It's just not as good as your other options. And that's the unfortunate truth for Zamazenta there. Let's see what else we got here. Forretress, I'm going to say maybe a C tier on Forretress. Forretress can be good in singles. I know it has Rapid Spin. It's also Bug Steel, which is a pretty interesting typing. I think for now we'll stick it in C because I don't think it's as bad as Mawile, who I haven't even decided if should even be in D tier or F tier. Because looking at the rest of these mons, like who actually deserves F tier here? Honestly, nobody. So I think Mawile might have to get moved down. You guys shouldn't use Mawile. There's other intimidate Pokemon to use over Mawile. D tier I could say is a nose pass kind of tier. A Pokemon that doesn't get much done. I mean, honestly, what does nose pass really do? It's just kind of have a bad typing with the Rock and Steel. Kind of the same problem that Aggron has. But I don't know if I would put Aggron in that same tier. I'm trying to convince myself not to put nose pass in F tier because I don't think it's garbage. F tier is for absolute trash, like the bottom of the barrel. Registeel saw a lot of play. Definitely saw a lot of play, if not A tier. I think Registeel saw a lot of play because Amnesia Registeel got, you know, iron defenses set up and you can sit there and body press the rest of the game. And so I definitely say that's A tier. Melmetal. If Melmetal was able to be played, it would be S tier. Have you guys seen what Double Iron Bash does? Double Iron Bash is too good of a move. It's like Iron Heading twice with the chance to flinch twice. Dirty. So dirty. Definitely S tier for that Pokemon. Speaking of steel types. No. Bronzong, I do want to say, is also A tier. JoeUX9 is having a lot of success with Bronzong. It's another steel psychic type. It's very good at setting up Trick Room. It also does pair very well with Groudons or with Evildon teams for the most part. It's good on the Sun team because it gets Levitate, so you can actually sit there and EQ yourself and not have to worry about it too much. Unfortunately, Lucario is a little bit rough this season. Lucario is a little bit rough. I'm going to go ahead and move Forretress down here, by the way, and I think C tier is a good tier for Lucario. Lucario, it used to be good with Mega because it used to get adaptability, but right now it's just not fast enough. There was a little bit of time where Lucario did see some play because, what was that move? Justified Beat Up was in the meta and it was popular. But there's just like, even when you're considering that strategy, like what's the reason of using Lucario over Cobalion? Who arguably does the same thing, and I will also put in the C tier because they are a niche pick. They are only good if you get that set up, and that's pretty much it. Durant. Okay. Durant's a solid B, but I'm going to put it top of B. The reason is because Hustle Durant did so much in early metagame, and it was such an oppressive force and hit like such a truck with Dynamax that it was an archetype. People really just built whole teams around this little ant, and the Dynamax meta did actually give that little ant a purpose in this game. An ant that literally no one ever used before this generation. So with that, I think Durant is going to go ahead and sit there in the B tier. Also, Togedemaru. Like, I'm finding a lot of these Pokemon. Maybe Togedemaru is more of a C tier. Togedemaru is like a support mon with the lightning rod that can help like a Gyarados. So I could see where that does its thing. I think Alolan Sandslash and Alolan Dugtrio both kind of belong in this this tier. Alolan Sandslash does have the added benefit of using a Slush Rush and being very fast, but the problem is with Ice and Steel, you add like the worst defensive typing to the best defensive typing in the game, you actually end up with not that great of a typing. You're 4 times weak to fighting and 4 times weak to fire. Those are very common typings. As a matter of fact, like most teams have a fire type on them. There's a whole grass, water, fire core. So with that fact, it struggles a little bit and really doesn't get the job done. Alolan Dugtrio just does what Dugtrio does, but doesn't get Arena Trap, so it's just significantly worse. I would honestly put that below at the ends of the D tiers. Aegislash is pretty decent. I think Aegislash is decent. The reason why I think Aegislash is decent is because it was a little bit popular when Kyogre was popular. Not Kyogre, Xerneas. When Xerneas was popular. People would just run the Gyro Ball Aegislash set. It kind of, you know, you wouldn't be able to get fake outed, and you could stop the Geomancy. Well, I guess not stop the Geomancy. You could abuse the Geomancy because they're going to make themselves 2 times faster. And you have Gyro Ball, which you can just clean that up. Kind of the same thing goes with Ferrothorn. Except with Kyogre in the meta, I honestly think Ferrothorn is a lot better than people are giving it credit. And I think it's going to come back. I'm surprised it's not on as many Kyogre teams as I've been seeing. I guess people just opt for Rillaboom or they opt for the Serena and don't have a spot for the other grass type, which I kind of get. But Ferrothorn on a rain team is devastating, especially if you have like a late game Ferrothorn. You get rid of all the fire types already, and you're just sitting there setting up Leech Seeds and going for iron defenses. You could sit there and just set up for days. Moving on. Heatran. I'm gonna give Heatran another A tier. I feel like Heatran is a lot better than these 4 in B tier, which is why I feel comfortable putting it in A tier. It's a very good pseudo-legendary, if not, I think it's a legendary, whatever they consider this mon. It's very unique typing, fire and steel. Not too many people have that same typing. I think no one has that same typing. It's 4 times weak to ground, which is unfortunate, but you could always give it an air balloon. You do have ways around it, and hits like a truck. Kaparaja. I think Kaparaja isn't awful. I don't know if it's just me. Like, it's between C and D. I wouldn't put it at the top of C, but I don't think it's bad. I mean, I just wish it hit harder. It does have Sheer Force. It does get, option to Sheer Force Life Orb. It also does have Heavy Metal, so you can kind of do something maybe with weight-based mons, but I think Sheer Force Life Orb would be the way to go. It does also get a G-Max form. G-Max form isn't that great. It just adds an entry hazard that are like steel spikes on the field. I don't know, something like that. Doesn't see a lot of play because if people are gonna want to use a steel type, they typically go for these top couple. But I feel like if you stick it on a Trick Room team, you're not gonna hate it too much. Bastiodon. I think Bastiodon's a solid D. Like before, it's not a great typing. It has the same problem that Aggron has. In fact, Aggron I'll probably put in D as well. It has the same issue Aggron has, where it just goes down to a ground move or a fighting move. But the benefit is these both have sturdy. Aggron hits a little harder than Bastiodon. The issue is Bastiodon has a lot of defenses, but has a 4 times weakness. So it's kind of counterintuitive in that sense. Now let's see. Berserker. I don't want to say Berserker is terrible. In fact, I don't think it's terrible. I think Berserker does have an interesting gimmick with Steely Spirit. I'll put it at top of D tier. It does have an interesting gimmick with Steely Spirit. In fact, it could make all these Pokemon hit a lot harder because of it. And it also does have access to Fake Out. So it's not the end of the world. There is a niche for it. I just don't know what it is. It's a very weird niche. Now, Duraludon. Duraludon I'll definitely put top of C tier. It was so much better than it is now. Because right now, it's not that great. Right now, we're in a meta where Duraludon will just go down. I don't think a Dynamax Duraludon makes a lot of sense because look at all these restricteds that you have that are Steel type. Even this one, you know, just another Steel type restricted. These two kind of do the exact same thing, except this one has the benefit of not being able to lower the stats, while this one just has the benefit of never going down, never dying. So I think Duraludon, just because of that fact, Duraludon kind of sits in a weird place. That's so unfortunate. Stack Attacka. I'll give a nice B. Actually, no. I think Stack Attacka is an A. I think Stack Attacka is actually better than Registeel in many situations. It's another great Trick Room setter. It's another great answer to Xerneas, which isn't that popular in the current meta. The more that I'm playing with this, I think this belongs down here. Yeah, this makes more sense. Yeah, it's not in a great place in the current metagame. But that's because Xerneas is in the metagame. The second that Xerneas comes back into the metagame, then Stack Attack is going to be everywhere. Kind of same thing goes for Celesteela. The Celesteela is a great Steel Flying type. In fact, it's the best Steel Flying type that we see here. Corviknight saw a little bit of play for a while, but the second Celesteela was released, Corviknight went bye-bye. It went far, far away. Where do we stick Celesteela? I'm gonna stick Celesteela right there. Yeah, I think that's okay. This is gonna be a weird list because I feel like so many of these Pokemon are good. Like Genesect is another one. I wouldn't say Genesect is A tier, but in singles it does a very good job with pivoting and with taking care of, you know, the types that it needs to take care of. I don't play singles too much, but I know that like a Scarfed or a Specs Genesect really does some serious damage. Kind of same thing goes for Magearna. In fact, I would say Magearna is a lot better than Genesect in that respect. I'll put Genesect top of B, put Magearna in A. How's that? This is where it gets a little hard. Skarmory is very good in singles. But you kind of do everything that Skarmory does and better. Like, I'll put Corviknight in B, put Skarmory in C. Skarmory can set up, you know, some hazards. Kartana, though. When Kartana had Tailwind, it was a lot better than it is now. In fact, I think Kartana is actually worse than Ferrothorn, and I would actually make a heavy bet, and I have a good case for as to why I think that is. It's mostly Tailwind, and Kartana kind of actually sits in a speed that isn't fast anymore. Kartana used to be fast when your Regielekis, your Zacians, and your Zambazentas didn't exist, but they all got introduced to this metagame. You got introduced to a Dragapult this metagame as well. The new average tier is no longer base 100. It's like base 110, 115, of which Kartana doesn't match, doesn't hit. So Kartana just gets outsped by fire types, gets outsped by, you know, Tailwind users, and doesn't have the Tailwind to match it either. Does kind of struggle, which is so sad because I love that Pokemon. And then, you know, the special defense stat doesn't help it at all either. Adding on to the C tier, I think Empoleon kind of belongs here. Empoleon doesn't see too much play. It does have use as a Stealth Rock user. It's also very interesting typing with Water and Steel. Not too many Water and Steel types in general. So that Pokemon does have that benefit. But along with that, it doesn't hit hard enough and it doesn't tank enough. So it is in kind of an average, weird little place. Excadrill, I will say, is... I think Excadrill, I will say A tier. The reason why I say A tier is because Excadrill is always next to T-Tar, right? And it's pretty much the only Sandrush user. I don't want to sound negative, but it's the only Sandrush user that isn't awful, right? It uses Sandrush very well. It's ground type. It's steel type. You can Dynamax it. It has base, what is it? 130, 140 attack. It hits like a truck. So I think it definitely belongs in that tier. Jirachi, I would say, belongs in B tier just because it's kind of a gimmick, right? Jirachi you can't use in VGC, but in singles you just sit there and para hacks people. Just hit them with the Iron Head, hit them with the Thunder Wave, and then constantly keep flinching them or paralyzing them the whole time. Steelix, I'm going to put Steelix in D tier. Steelix has way too much defense and not enough anything else. I don't think it's as bad as a lot of other these Pokemon, but it's definitely not as good as these. Magnezone, I think it's a solid C. Magnezone is ironically a very good counter to Celesteela because you can lock it in with Magnet Pull, but you also do have access to good abilities like Sturdy. And Electric's just a great type in general, I feel as well. Bisharp, I will put Bisharp in this tier. I'll put Bisharp in this tier because I do feel like Bisharp, I've had more fun in Bisharp and more success with Bisharp in VGC than I have with Aegislash. And the combination of just Assurance and Defiant and being one of the few Defiant users on top of it all does this Pokemon pretty good. I think it definitely can make it happen in B tier. Escavalier. I'll give Escavalier C tier. It's good in Dynamax. It does have access to cool abilities like Overcoat, but it doesn't make too much happen. Klefki is another one that is another C tier kind of mon. It is a support mon. It can do Swagger. It can do Thunder Wave. It does have Prankster. It does have Screens, but it doesn't see a lot of play because people just kind of use Grimmsnarl for that right now. And then Klingklang. D tier. I think like Glick made something happen with Klingklang once, but then after that, no one ever saw play with it ever again. I understand it gets shift gear and a whole bunch of other cool things, but like, let's be honest with ourselves. It's not that phenomenal. Okay, this tier list is looking kind of okay to me. I definitely can see where some people can make some controversial arguments. So please leave them down below. I'd love to hear them, just because I don't feel like my tier lists are ever the end-all be-all when it comes to tier lists. And I do feel like there is room for improvement, but I think for like a first chance and a first quick glance, this seems pretty average. What do you guys think? Let me know. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you guys again here tomorrow for some more tier lists. I'm probably gonna go through all the typings at this point just because I just started doing that and I might as well finish it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't liked the video, go ahead and do so. Subscribe to the channel if you're excited for Series 12 and you're also excited for Pokemon Legends Arceus because I'm going to be playing the heck out of that game. Anyway, I'm Kevin, this is Pokésports. Have a great night. Peace out.